There is a war being fought right now. Not with bullets, not yet. It is happening on the most hostile terrain on Earth, and the world has no idea it has already begun. Russia, China, the United States, Norway, Canada, every major power on Earth is racing north, with billions of dollars in secret facilities, converging on one frozen point. This is not a climate story, this is a power story. The greatest strategic repositioning since World War II, and it is happening right now. Under the ice, the true battlefield remains invisible. In 2007, Russia planted a flag on the Arctic seabed, 4,000 meters down. A symbolic act, the power of the state projected across the frozen north. But the world understood its message. The Arctic is ours, come and take it. Russia's trefoil base, built for permafrost, built for war. Self-sustaining, hermetically sealed, armed to the teeth, it is just one of 16 new Arctic military installations. Russia has opened since 2013. Russia's nuclear submarines operate year-round beneath the Arctic ice. Invisible to satellites, invisible to radar, mechanical precision in the deep, carrying missiles that can reach any city on Earth within 30 minutes. The ice is not a barrier, it is a shield, rising from the frozen depths. Thule, Greenland, the northernmost sentinel of the American military, America's most strategic installation in the entire Arctic, the first tripwire if a missile leaves Russian soil, and the last line of warning before it reaches a city. Beneath the Arctic seabed, 30% of the world's undiscovered natural gas, 13% of its untapped oil, resources worth more than $10 trillion, the prize at the top of the world. That is what every stronghold is really guarding. The Northern Sea Route cuts Asia to Europe shipping by weeks, bypassing every choke point on Earth, a new geography of trade and power. No Suez, no piracy zones. Russia wants to own it, and it is building fast, a new empire of shipping. The Kola Peninsula holds more nuclear warheads per square kilometer than anywhere else on Earth. Russia's entire military logic, its crown jewel, is built around the Arctic. Russia jams GPS signals over northern Norway routinely, the unseen war, disrupting civilian aviation, endangering ships at sea. It is not quite war, it is not peace. The silent signals are the real weapons. It is a daily reminder of who is most comfortable operating in the dark. Gray zone operations are the Arctic's dominant warfare mode. Not war, not peace, something in between and always escalating. This is how territories are lost in the modern era, shadowing the unknown. One ambiguous encounter at a time. The rules of the game are changing. Beneath the East Siberian shelf lies more methane than in the entire atmosphere. If even 10% is released, it triggers an irreversible warming cascade. The clocks are counting in the wrong direction. A warning from the deep. Finland has 1,340 kilometers of border with Russia and a history of survival, and spent 75 years learning to survive beside it. Every advance is monitored. Now it is a NATO member. Russia's decision to invade Ukraine gave NATO its most dangerous northern flank. China calls itself a near-Arctic state, a claim backed by icebreakers, a term that exists in no international law, a map rewritten in secret. It is building Arctic presence piece by piece, a network of ice and steel, and no one has found a legal way to stop it. The Arctic Council was built to keep the peace at the top of the world. Russia's suspension in 2022 shattered that illusion. Diplomacy is theater. Diplomacy in the Arctic is now theater. The real negotiations happen in command centers. Power is the only language. Alert Station has been listening to the Arctic since 1950. Every nuclear test, every submarine movement, every coded transmission, every signal lost in the snow. The log continues, and the frequency has never been higher. The assessment is complete. The board is set across the ice. The Arctic is where the world's most dangerous contest is being decided. Not in Ukraine, not in the Taiwan Strait, not in the Middle East. Here, in the cold, in the silence. The final assessment is clear. From space, there are no borders. The Arctic is simply the top of a planet. The Arctic is simply the top of a planet, a shared horizon of ice. The strongholds, the icebreakers, the missiles, the pipelines, all of it on one small world that cannot be replaced. A fragile, frozen sphere. The real reason superpowers are building billion-dollar Arctic strongholds is the same reason empires have always reached for what they cannot hold. What the Arctic contains is too valuable to leave for someone else. And what it is becoming cannot be stopped by anyone. Who owns the end of the world? There is a war being fought right now in the shadows of the North. Not with bullets, not yet, but with steel and ice. It is being fought on the most hostile terrain on Earth today. and the world has no idea it has already begun beneath the surface. Russia, China, the United States, Norway, Canada, all looking north. Every major power on Earth is racing north toward the unknown. Billions of dollars, secret facilities, military assets are moving, all converging on one frozen point at the top of the world tonight. The Arctic is melting at a rate that defies all expectations. And what lies underneath is changing everything we know about power. Shipping lanes, military corridors, resources worth trillions are emerging. The race to control the top of the world has already started in earnest. Every cable laid, every base drilled into the permafrost, every icebreaker launched carries one message to the global stage. We are claiming what is below the surface of the frozen sea, and we will not share it with anyone else in this strategic race. This is not a climate story for the environmentalists alone. This is a power story about the future of global dominance. The greatest strategic repositioning since World War II is happening. And it is happening right now, under the ice and out of sight. Svalbard, a Norwegian archipelago, legally demilitarized and quiet. But every nation on Earth is watching it closely from the shadows. Because whoever controls these islands controls a gateway to the north. A gateway that every superpower wants to hold for themselves. The Northern Sea Route cuts Asia to Europe shipping by many weeks. It bypasses every traditional choke point in the southern oceans. No Suez, no Strait of Malacca, no piracy zones to worry about. Russia wants to own it, and it is building fast on the coast. Beneath the Arctic seabed lies a staggering secret of wealth. 30% of the world's undiscovered natural gas is there. 13% of its untapped oil is locked beneath the floor. Resources worth more than $10 trillion are at stake. In 2007, Russia did something no nation had done before then. They planted a flag on the Arctic seabed in a display of strength. A symbolic act, but the world understood its deep meaning clearly. The Arctic is ours. Come and take it if you dare to try. Russia's legal claim, the Lomonosov Ridge, is part of its shelf. If proven, it controls over 1.2 million square kilometers of seabed. The oil, the gas, the minerals, the routes, all belong to them. The UN has been deliberating since 2001. Russia is not waiting. Russia's trefoil base, built for permafrost, built for war. Self-sustaining, hermetically sealed, armed to the teeth. It sits 900 kilometers from the North Pole. And it is just one of 16 new Arctic military installations. Russia has rebuilt its entire Cold War Arctic defense network and upgraded it with 21st century weapons systems. Every approach from the north, monitored. Every corridor covered, every signal is tracked. Russia's nuclear submarine fleet operates year-round under ice. Invisible to satellites, invisible to radar, silence is lethal, carrying missiles that can reach any city on Earth within 30 minutes. The ice is not just a barrier, it is a shield for power. Norway is the frontline NATO member in the Arctic. It watches. Its border with Russia spans 198 kilometers of frozen ground. Every incursion, every provocation, every shadow is monitored. Norway watches and quietly escalates its own polar presence. The Jayuk Gap, a naval choke point that won the Cold War before. Now Russian submarines pass through it regularly and silently. NATO's detection systems are at maximum capacity right now. The undersea arms race is running hotter than ever before. Thule Air Base, Greenland, America's northernmost military post. It has watched the skies above the pole since 1951 without rest. Now it watches Chinese satellites too in the cold dark. The Arctic sky has become as contested as the ground below. Greenland holds some of the largest rare earth deposits on Earth. Materials essential for fighter jets and nuclear warheads are here. Every tech revolution runs on what lies beneath this thick ice. And every superpower has sent geologists to confirm the prize. America's offer to buy Greenland was dismissed as absurd then. But the strategic logic was impeccably rational for the future. Whoever controls Greenland controls the Arctic's western flank. And Washington has not stopped pursuing that control today. China calls itself a near-Arctic state in its policy. It is not. Geographically, Beijing is far from the Arctic Circle, but China has rewritten geography before in other regions. Its Polar Silk Road is an infrastructure takeover project. Within 2 decades, the Arctic Ocean may be ice-free. China tried to lease a naval base in Iceland. They said no. China tried to purchase Arctic land in Canada. It was blocked. Every door closed. China simply knocked on the next one. Within 2 decades, the Arctic Ocean may be ice-free in summer. The transpolar route will open, directly over the pole itself. It will be the most significant shipping lane ever created. And every superpower is building to own it right now. Russia's Yamal LNG project was a statement of territorial intent. built on some of the most inhospitable terrain on Earth, operating year-round with specially designed ice-class tankers, sending gas to Asia without passing Western waterways. Russia's Arctic energy exports already exceed $80 billion, and the infrastructure is accelerating across the northern coast. Every pipeline, every port, every icebreaker is a message. It is not energy policy, it is geopolitical architecture. America's Arctic strategy has always run through Alaska, but the US has been slow compared to Russia's rapid pace. For decades, Washington treated the Arctic as a given. Now the Pentagon is scrambling to close the strategic gap. The Pentagon has redesigned entire military brigades for combat. Cold weather training has returned to historic high levels. America is relearning how to fight in the ice once again. Because the generals know that war in the Arctic is possible. NORAD was built for one reason, to watch the North Pole. Because every Russian nuclear missile flies over the Arctic. The shortest path from Moscow to New York is over the top. It is straight over the top of the world where eyes watch. The Arctic is the only corridor that matters for nuclear war. It is why America built its missile defense in Alaska. Every interceptor is aimed at the same polar trajectory. If deterrence ever fails, the Arctic is where they fly. Russia's new hypersonic weapons change the equation entirely. The Kinzhal missile travels at Mach 10. No defense can stop it. It is fired from Arctic-based aircraft in the deep cold. It renders most American early warning systems obsolete today. The Kola Peninsula houses more nuclear warheads than anywhere else. Russia's Northern Fleet is its most powerful military force. It is the crown jewel of Russian military power. Its entire operational logic is built around the Arctic. Every week, NATO and Russian forces meet in the Barents Sea. Close passes, intercepted communications, disputed zones. Each encounter is a message sent from one power to another. The Arctic is where the next great confrontation is decided. The Arctic Council was designed to keep the peace here. 8 member nations, cooperation, science, environmental protection. But Russia's suspension in 2022 shattered that peaceful illusion. Diplomacy in the Arctic is now theater for the world. Norway's Navy runs constant anti-submarine patrols daily, tracking Russian submarines departing the Kola Peninsula, following them through the Jayot Gap and into the Atlantic. Because what enters the Atlantic undetected is a threat. Canada insists the Northwest Passage is its internal waterway. Indigenous soldiers who know this terrain better than any. Control room staffed, mapping the Northwest Passage now. The iconic route through the Canadian Arctic is opening up. For decades, Canada and Denmark fought over a barren rock. In 2022, they finally split it in two forever. Because every square meter carries trillion-dollar implications. The Arctic story is one of unprecedented change. Part 1 ends with a question every government is asking. Not if conflict will come to the Arctic, but when and who will be ready for the final frontier challenge. The world's most contested silence is breaking. Russia has not just built bases in the Arctic. It has built civilization there, permanent towns, full infrastructure, families. It is claiming territory the only way that matters, establishing presence by living on it. Russian strategic bombers probe North American air defenses weekly. They rarely cross into sovereign airspace. They don't need to. The message is sent at the boundary. We can reach you. We are testing whether you can stop us. Russia's Poseidon is a weapon without historical precedent, a nuclear-armed autonomous underwater torpedo. NATO has created its first dedicated Arctic command, creating a radioactive tidal wave that no defense system can stop. The Arctic contest has gone vertical. Space, ionosphere, electromagnetic spectrum. Every superpower is positioning assets above the Arctic for warfare below it. The battle for the pole is also a battle for the sky above it. Every superpower is positioning assets above the Arctic for warfare below it. China conducted its first joint Arctic military exercise in 2019. It has participated in Russian Arctic exercises annually since 2015. Its submarines now operate in Arctic waters regularly. China has arrived in the Arctic. It is not leaving. The Bering Strait is where America and Russia literally face each other. 2 miles of open water on a clear day. This is the land bridge our ancestors crossed. It is also the corridor through which any Arctic conflict would erupt first. It is also the corridor through which any Arctic conflict would erupt first. America has a deep water port problem in the Arctic. Russia has 16. The United States has 0 above the Arctic Circle. Congress has approved funding. Construction has begun. But Russia has a 20-year head start. Murmansk is the nerve center of Russian Arctic power. It is the largest human settlement in the high Arctic, home to the world's only fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers. Russia suddenly had NATO partners on its entire western flank. Severodvinsk is building submarines faster than at any time since the Cold War. Russia suddenly had NATO partners on its entire western flank. Each Bore submarine carries 16 Bulava ICBMs. Russia is not maintaining its nuclear fleet, it is expanding it. Finland and Sweden joining NATO changed the Arctic map overnight. Russia suddenly had NATO partners on its entire western flank. The Baltic became virtually a NATO lake. And Russia's Arctic position became strategically encircled on its western approaches. NATO has created its first dedicated Arctic command, 32 nations, one mission, the High North. Russia's submarine resurgence brought NATO home to Iceland. NATO call it deterrence. Both are correct. Cold response is NATO's message to Moscow, 66 years of Arctic warfare experience. Technology advantage on full display. We have been practicing this war for longer than you think. Technology advantage on full display. We have been practicing this war for longer than you think. The Arctic's indigenous peoples are watching their world end. The permafrost that built their civilization is collapsing, while military planners map new supply routes over their ancestral lands. The Arctic conquest has human casualties that no press conference mentions. The very thing that makes the Arctic valuable is destroying it. Melting ice releases methane. Methane accelerates warming. More melting means more access. More access means more exploitation. The race to control the Arctic is also accelerating its destruction. Climate change is Russia's Arctic ally and enemy simultaneously. More open water means more access for its fleet, but melting permafrost is destroying the very bases that fleet depends on. The Arctic is changing faster than any military can adapt. China controls 85% of global rare earth processing. The minerals that make every modern weapon system work, every stealth fighter, every precision-guided missile. Every year, more ships transit the Northwest Passage without asking Canada's permission. Whoever controls the Arctic's untapped rare earths rewrites that equation. The Arctic's resources sit beneath the lands of the Inuit, Nenets, Sami, and Yupik. Their consent, their land, their lives. The superpowers come with contracts and compensations, but the land has been theirs for 10,000 years. Iceland has no military, but it is one of NATO's most strategically critical members. It sits atop the Guyuk Gap, the undersea chokepoint for the entire North Atlantic. In 2006, the US closed its Keflavik base. In 2016, it came back. Russia's submarine resurgence brought NATO home to Iceland. 3 nations claim the Lomonosov Ridge as their continental shelf extension. Russia, Canada, Denmark on behalf of Greenland. The legal case will take decades. The resource stakes will not wait. Whoever wins controls a territory larger than Western Europe. Every year, more ships transit the Northwest Passage without asking Canada's permission. Some are research vessels, some fly military flags. Each passage without permission is a legal argument made in steel. Canada's sovereignty claim is only as strong as its ability to enforce it. Canada patrols its Arctic with pride and limited resources. 6 patrol ships for one of the world's largest maritime territories. The Russians have nuclear icebreakers and missile systems. Canada has sovereignty declarations and coastal patrols. Novaya Zemlya witnessed the most powerful explosion in human history, 57 megatons, 3,800 times the Hiroshima bomb. The Arctic has always been where the most extreme weapons are tested, because out here, only the permafrost bears witness. Russia's Burevestnik cruise missile is theoretically unstoppable. Nuclear-powered, unlimited range, flying at terrain-hugging altitudes. In 2019, one exploded during recovery at sea. 5 Russian nuclear engineers died. Russia called them heroes for their sacrifice in the Arctic. The Finnmark region of northern Norway is NATO's most exposed terrain. Thin population, vast wilderness, a single road connecting it to reinforcements. NATO's response time to the Arctic frontier is measured in days. Russia is already there. NATO's response time to the Arctic frontier is measured in days. Russia is already there. In Kirkenes, the Arctic geopolitical crisis is not abstract. It is the Russian you buy groceries from, the border you can see from town, the NATO radar array they built on the hill last year. The Arctic is not a distant strategic concept here. It is the morning commute. NATO's enhanced forward presence is a tripwire strategy, small enough not to provoke, large enough to guarantee Allied response. Every soldier from every nation present is a political commitment. Attack one, attack all, even here, even in the dark and cold. Attack one, attack all, even here, even in the dark and cold. The world's internet runs on cables along the Arctic and North Atlantic seabed. Cutting them would cause economic damage measured in trillions per hour. Russian submarines operate near these cables routinely. This is not an accident, it is leverage. The Arctic holds an archive of Earth's entire climate history. Scientists read the future in the ice of the past. What they find terrifies them. Because the warming happening now has no historical precedent in 800,000 years. Because the warming happening now has no historical precedent in 800,000 years. The Pentagon does not debate climate change. It plans around it. Every Arctic military base is also a climate adaptation investment. The real war the generals fear is not with Russia or China. Arctic instability listed as a top national security risk. The Arctic is not just a strategic prize, it is the thermostat of the entire planetary system. Every decision made there echoes across every other crisis on Earth. Preparation for migration-driven conflict. The Arctic tipping point consequences followed by geopolitical crisis scenarios. Finland has 1,340 kilometers of border with Russia. It spent 75 years as a neutral buffer state. Now it is a NATO member with one of Europe's most capable militaries. Russia's decision to invade Ukraine gave NATO its most dangerous northern flank. Russia's decision to invade Ukraine gave NATO its most dangerous northern flank. Finland takes survival seriously in a way most Western countries do not. Every citizen knows where to go. Every city has deep bunkers stocked with supplies. Every city has deep bunkers stocked with supplies. The population is genuinely practiced in survival. The Baltic Sea is now the most strategically transformed body of water since 1945. Russia's Kaliningrad is encircled, its Baltic fleet largely bottled. The Arctic flank has become Russia's primary strategic outlet, which is exactly why the Kremlin is investing there at unprecedented scale. Russia has been strategically compressed since 2022, every flank constricted, every avenue blocked, except one, the Arctic, the last great strategic depth, the final frontier of Russian power. The final frontier of Russian power. Part 2 ends where the diplomacy ends. In conference rooms, they speak of cooperation. Part 2 ends where the diplomacy ends. In conference rooms, they speak of cooperation. What comes next is not peace. What comes next is not peace. The Arctic kills without politics or allegiance. No nation has found a way to fight the cold, only survive it. Every military planner knows this. And yet, the weapons keep arriving. The classified war games reach the same conclusion every time. An Arctic conflict does not stay limited. Resource competition becomes territorial dispute. Territorial dispute becomes armed confrontation. Armed confrontation at this latitude, with these weapons, becomes nuclear very quickly. When Chinese warships first transited Norwegian-adjacent Arctic waters, no one fired. But the alarm sounded in every Allied capital simultaneously. This was not a research vessel, not a merchant ship. This was Beijing announcing, "We are a naval power in the Arctic, prepare accordingly." Gray zone operations are the Arctic's dominant warfare mode. Not war, not peace, something in between, always escalating. Deniable, deliberate, designed to accumulate advantage without triggering a response. This is how territories are lost in the modern era, one ambiguous encounter at a time. Russia jams GPS signals over northern Norway routinely. It disrupts civilian aviation and maritime navigation. It is not an act of war. It is not quite peace. It is a daily reminder of who is most comfortable operating in the dark. The insurance industry priced Arctic routes as impossibly risky 15 years ago. Vessels that could never have made this journey without icebreaker escort 10 years ago, now proceeding independently. The market knows before the politicians admit. The Arctic is open. The scramble has already begun. Russia's Arctic empire is expensive and logistically fragile. The distances between installations are measured in hundreds of miles of nothing. Every bullet, every meal, every spare part flies in at extraordinary cost. Every bullet, every meal, every spare part flies in at extraordinary cost. Norilsk produces 35% of the world's palladium, essential for catalytic converters and electronics. Its contamination has permanently destroyed rivers and lakes for hundreds of kilometers. The Arctic's resources come at a cost that no profit and loss statement captures. The superpowers take the resources. The Arctic pays the price. Beneath the East Siberian shelf lies more methane than in the entire atmosphere. If even 10% is released, it triggers an irreversible warming cascade. Scientists call it a tipping point. Governments call it someone else's problem. The clocks are counting in the wrong direction. Scientists from adversary nations still share Arctic data because the climate does not recognize borders. It is the last domain where Moscow and Washington cooperate, and even that cooperation is becoming politically untenable. The satellite war over the Arctic is already happening. Jamming, spoofing, close approach operations. Each superpower is preparing to blind the other's space-based systems. Because the first casualty of Arctic conflict will be communications. The next Arctic conflict will not be fought by soldiers alone. Autonomous systems are being designed specifically for polar warfare. Drones that navigate without GPS, submarines that hunt independently. The Arctic battlefield is being automated faster than any military doctrine can keep pace. America has 2 operational icebreakers for the entire Arctic. Russia has 46. When the Polar Security Cutter finally enters service, Russia will have more new ones. In the Arctic, access requires icebreakers. Influence requires icebreakers. Power is icebreakers. Russia needs Chinese investment to develop its Arctic resources. China needs Russian cooperation to access the Arctic at all. Their No Limits partnership has found its most practical expression above the Arctic Circle. 2 powers excluded from the Western-led order, building their own lane at the top of the world. Power of Siberia 2 is not just a gas pipeline. It is the physical expression of a Eurasian alliance. Russian resources flowing east as Western sanctions push Moscow from the west. China's energy security guaranteed by Arctic extraction. Both powers benefit, both are bound. NATO practices retaking occupied Arctic territory. The scenarios are classified, the training is real. Every general in that command room has been asked the same question. Can you do this in January, in a blizzard at -40? The Arctic kills its own soldiers too. Kursk 2,118 sailors lost in the Barents Sea. Russia waited 4 days before accepting Norwegian help. All perished. The Arctic has no politics, only physics, and physics does not negotiate. The Soviet Union left a nuclear legacy in the Arctic that Russia can barely afford to clean up. Decommissioned submarines, radioactive waste in sealed containers on the seabed, nuclear reactors corroding slowly into the Arctic Ocean. The military race continues. The cleanup of the last race remains unfinished. The Arctic does not care about your military budget. Cold weather casualties can exceed combat casualties. Russia's greatest advantage in the Arctic is not weapons. It is generations of living there, knowing what the cold demands. Every classified Arctic wargame ends the same way. The unique combination of nuclear weapons, resource stakes, and national prestige means that once armed conflict begins at the pole, de-escalation is almost impossible. This is why the military buildups continue, because neither side can afford to be second. Russia charges tolls, requires icebreaker escorts, and reserves the right to reject any vessel. The international community calls this illegal. Russia calls it sovereign. The legal argument matters less than the practical reality. Russia controls access, and it is profiting from that control right now. China's Icelandic research station is legal. It conducts real science. It also has a perfect view of the most strategically important undersea passage in the world. Beijing says coincidence, Washington says surveillance. The truth is both are correct. China's fishing fleet is the world's largest and most surveilled. In the Arctic approaches, Chinese fishing vessels operate near every NATO installation, every cable route, every radar station, every naval base. Intelligence collection does not require a warship. US and Russian submarines encounter each other regularly under the Arctic ice. Incidents that result in damage have occurred, names remain classified, numbers disputed. Each encounter is managed by trained professionals who know where the line is. The worry is, what happens when someone crosses it by accident? The modern battlefield requires no weapons in the first phase. Commercial drones, research stations, fishing vessels, cable-laying ships, each one a legal intelligence asset, each one building the targeting picture. The shooting war has not started. The intelligence war has never stopped. Russia's Arctic exercises are rehearsals. Their scenario is always the same, a rapid seizure before NATO can respond. The so-called Fabian strategy, move fast, take the prize, dare NATO to take it back. It has worked before. It is the logic of Crimea applied to the Arctic frontier. Svalbard's legal status is a Cold War-era compromise that pleases no one. Norway governs. All signatories can conduct commercial and research activities. Russia has a mining town, Barentsburg, 40 kilometers from Longyearbyen. And what Russia does in Barentsburg has drawn increasing Norwegian intelligence attention. Svalbard's legal status is a Cold War-era compromise that pleases no one. Not for the coal, for the location. Barentsburg sits at the intersection of critical sea and air routes. The mine is a cover story, the intelligence operation is the actual purpose. Greenland's 57,000 people hold the key to the entire Arctic balance. 4 superpowers are courting them simultaneously. America, China, Russia, the European Union. The Greenlandic people may be the most strategically consequential population per capita on Earth. The United States maintains the most strategically important military base in the Arctic without a formal agreement. Greenland could ask them to leave tomorrow. China is offering Greenland everything it asks, with no military strings attached. The strategic future of the Arctic may be decided in a government office in Nuuk. The market knows before the politicians admit. New radar, new bases, new icebreakers under construction. But Russia's 20-year head start is not erased by a budget line. Catching up in the Arctic takes decades. The race began without America noticing. In Polar Night, the Arctic belongs to those who trained in darkness. In Polar Night, the Arctic belongs to those who trained in darkness. All happen under cover of months of perpetual night. This is where the competition never sleeps, even when the sun does. The Arctic seabed is the most important unmapped terrain on Earth. Understanding its contours means knowing where submarines hide. Every survey vessel in these waters is also an intelligence asset. The ocean floor will determine who controls the ocean above it. The Arctic demands a humility that generals rarely admit. Every deployment above the circle is a wager against the cold. Every deployment above the circle is a wager against the cold. And the cold does not negotiate terms of surrender. Part 3 ends with the Arctic standing at the edge. The weapons are positioned, the claims are staked, the alliances are set. Every superpower has crossed a threshold from which withdrawal is political suicide. The sun returns to the Arctic after months of darkness. But the shadow of conflict has never left.
The world has passed a threshold that cannot be uncrossed. The Arctic Ocean is open. What was frozen for 10,000 years of human civilization is now a highway. And every power on Earth is asking the same question. Whose highway is it? The United Nations cannot resolve Arctic conflicts. Russia holds a permanent Security Council veto. China holds a permanent veto. International law can describe the rules. It cannot enforce them. The Arctic was never just about the 8 Arctic states. Every maritime nation on Earth has a stake in its future. India, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Brazil. The Arctic contest is globalizing. Even as its geography limits who can truly compete. An Arctic oil spill is not like other disasters. Under pack ice, containment is impossible with current technology. An accident at scale would contaminate the Arctic Ocean for a generation. Every Arctic drilling operation is a wager against a catastrophe we cannot fix. Under the Arctic's surface, the war that isn't a war continues. Every day, every hour. In the cold and the dark, submarines trailing submarines. Sensors are listening to sensors. The intelligence contest that has been running without interruption since 1949. In the margins of the conflict, scientists from adversary nations still work together. Because governance requires trust, and trust requires de-escalation. And de-escalation requires a nation to accept strategic disadvantage. And no superpower will do that, not here, not with these stakes. Russia's nuclear icebreakers are the physical expression of its Arctic doctrine. They go where nothing else can go. They open routes no other nation can open. In the Arctic, the icebreaker is the unit of power, and Russia has more nuclear icebreakers than the rest of the world combined. The Arctic's indigenous peoples have watched empires come and go. Now they watch the superpowers scramble with ancient eyes. The people who will resolve the Arctic crisis have not yet made the decisions that matter, because the Arctic truth, once fully told, requires something from everyone. The Arctic existed for 4 billion years before nations found it. A managed rivalry or an unmanaged catastrophe? Their verdict on the billions being spent, you are fighting over a world you are simultaneously destroying. We were here before you came. We will name what you are doing. The Nordic nations have created something remarkable in response to the Arctic crisis, a unified defense identity that did not exist before 2022. Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, 5 nations that spent centuries fighting each other, now facing north together. NATO's new Arctic command bunker is a statement of permanence. We are not here for exercises. We are not here for a budget cycle. We are here for as long as the threat exists. And we are building infrastructure that will outlast every government currently in power. Russia's S-500 Prometei can engage targets in near space. It can intercept hypersonic missiles, satellites, stealth aircraft. Russian hypersonics provoke more NATO deployments. Each response rational, each step forward irreversible. The latter has no ceiling. America's stealth advantage is being tested over the Arctic daily. Can the B-21 Raider penetrate Russian Arctic air defenses? The answer to that question is the most classified information in the Pentagon. Because everything else, every other strategy, depends on it. The Cold War's greatest intelligence triumph was SOSUS. Its Arctic components are being rebuilt for the 21st century. Because the submarines are back, and the sea they move through is no longer the same sea. By 2040, the Arctic could be generating $10 trillion annually. Energy, shipping, rare earths, strategic positioning. The nation that controls the Arctic controls the century's most valuable real estate. This is what the bases are for. This is why the missiles point north. Russia is laying cable, America is laying cable, China wants to, Whoever routes communications through their Arctic territory has leverage. Whoever routes communications through their Arctic territory has leverage. The internet itself runs through the Arctic now. Some nations are experimenting with Arctic geoengineering to slow ice loss. Others see it as a potential weapon. Preserve ice where it helps your military. Melt it where it helps your enemy. Climate science as warfare has already been theorized in classified documents. The planet's thermostat is now a potential strategic asset. Every major resource discovery in the Arctic changes the calculus. Who has the icebreakers to get the drilling equipment there? The answers to these questions determine the 21st century's power structure. The Arctic escalation cycle has no obvious stopping point. American hypersonics in Norway provoke Russian hypersonics in the Arctic. Russian hypersonics provoke more NATO deployments. Each response rational, each step forward irreversible, the latter has no ceiling. Deployed in the Arctic, it creates an anti-access zone over the entire polar region. When the leaders finally meet over the Arctic question, there are no good options. Mutual assured destruction remains the ultimate deterrent and the ultimate risk. Every concession looks like weakness, every escalation looks like madness. The Arctic has become the world's most consequential diplomatic problem. In the margins of the conflict, scientists from adversary nations still work together. They share data about a planet that is changing faster than any political cycle. It is the most fragile form of cooperation on Earth, and it is the only model that might eventually lead somewhere else. The Arctic is one of Earth's last wild places. It has its own logic, its own ecology, its own time. India, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Brazil, they will not survive the future that the superpowers are building for them. The reality is darker than the icons. The money has arrived in the Arctic before the law has. Venture capital, sovereign wealth funds, defense contractors, energy majors, all racing to position before the rules are written. Venture capital, sovereign wealth funds, defense contractors, energy majors. The world is beginning to understand what has been happening above the circle. The Arctic contest is globalizing, even as its geography limits who can truly compete. But understanding is not the same as action. Because the Arctic truth, once fully told, requires something from everyone. The choices being made today in Arctic war rooms and corporate boardrooms will determine what kind of world she inherits. A managed rivalry or an unmanaged catastrophe? There is no third option. The Arctic does not offer them. The choices of this generation built this problem. The next generation will decide if it remains manageable. The Barents Sea Fisheries Agreement has survived every geopolitical crisis for 50 years. Russian and Norwegian fishermen work the same waters under shared rules. Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland. It is also evidence that when both sides need something badly enough, they find a way. Military planners have a term for what they fear most in the Arctic, fait accompli, a rapid seizure of territory or infrastructure before any response is possible. China did it in the South China Sea, Russia did it in Crimea. International law can describe the rules, it cannot enforce them. America is catching up slowly, expensively, with generational commitment. The soldiers at these new posts were born after the Cold War. They are the first Americans to grow up in a world where the Arctic is contested territory. Their predecessors won the Cold War partly above the circle. Their descendants may have to do it again. Alert has been listening to the Arctic since 1950. Every nuclear test, every submarine movement, every coded transmission. From this outpost at the edge of everything, Canada has watched the world's most dangerous game. The log continues. The frequency has never been higher. The intelligence assessment is complete. The Arctic is where the world's most dangerous strategic contest is being decided. Not in Ukraine, not in the Taiwan Strait, not in the Middle East. Here, in the cold, in the silence, at the top of the world. The Arctic is where the world's most dangerous strategic contest is being decided. They are students now, junior officers, scientists, engineers. The choices of this generation built this problem. The next generation will decide if it remains manageable or becomes the crisis that defines their century. The Arctic existed for 4 billion years before nations found it. It will exist long after the nations that are fighting over it are gone. It will exist long after the nations that are fighting over it are gone. It asks whether the species that discovered it deserves to keep it. The North Pole belongs to no one. This simple fact is the root of everything you have witnessed. No sovereignty, no treaty, no law firm, no army. Just physics, ambition, and the question of whether civilization is equal to the challenge. From space, there are no borders. The Arctic is simply the top of a planet, the planet where all of this is happening. The strongholds, the icebreakers, the missiles, the pipelines, all of it on one small world that cannot be replaced. The real reason global superpowers are building billion-dollar Arctic strongholds is the same reason empires have always reached for what they could not hold. Because what the Arctic contains is too valuable to leave for someone else, and what the Arctic is becoming cannot be stopped by anyone. The strongholds are the answer to a question that should never have been asked: who owns the end of the world?